So, William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564, where we know he attended a local grammar school. He married a local woman whose name was Anne Hathaway, and that's all we know, most of all, of his life before he went to London. In fact, we find him in London in 1584, so the period that goes from 1584 to 1982 is not very well known. He may have joined one of those traveling companies, those theatrical traveling companies that were so, numerous in those days, but that's not for certain. But we surely find him in London, where we start having a look at his beginnings in 1592 as an actor and as a playwright. We all know that in that period, actors were not admitted to act in certain places in London, so they had to have a kind of protector. Each one of them had them, and also Shakespeare's companies, that was called the Lord Chamberlain's Men, after the protection of Lord Chamberlain himself. He even founded a theatre of his own, his company, I mean, in 1599, that was the Globe. We know that the first one was built in 1576 by James Burbage, but then each company managed to try to build one of their own so that they could play their own, works there. And that's what the company that was headed by William Shakespeare did. The Globe, that is still now in London after it was burned down, rebuilt, and so we have a nice copy of the Globe now in London. We know also that after Elizabeth I died in 1603 and James I became a king, he was under the protection of the king himself, and that's why his company came to be known as the King's Men. Well, after all this, we know that Shakespeare tried to put together a bit of money. He wanted to buy some lands and a house in Stratford-upon-Avon, where he went back and died in 1616. He may have died on the same day that he was born, that was the 23rd of April. Now, to better, have an idea of the enormous works that he did, and it's a good thing to put them together according to certain characteristics. So just an analysis of some of his most important works, even if in a second lesson we will have a look at 2 or 3 of his works, most fundamental works that you all know. So, to divide them in genres, we call them, we can start with the English history plays. There are a lot of these that regard some of the most important kings that were in England from the 12th century to the 16th, more or less, and they go under the names of Richard III, Richard II, Henry IV, Henry V, Henry VI. For example, Henry VI, a well-known play that tends to give an idea of the patriotic atmosphere that tended to be present during Elizabeth's time. So this patriotism was a unifying element that Queen Elizabeth tried to put together regarding her people. It is because there was this growing national pride. It was because of this that she managed also to contrast the idea of the King of Spain, that was Philip II, that wanted to marry and so become also referring point for England. But she refused this, and so he managed to put together that famous Invincible Armada. But he did not manage to conquer England, and naturally this was a growth for the patriotism and the national pride of England. And then we could continue with, for example, the Roman plays. Naturally, they are set in ancient Rome. The source, most of them have as a source Plutarch's parallel lives. And the main themes that characterize these Roman plays surely go in the idea of power, for example, how it is gained, how it is influenced, or how it influences the people and how they use it, how dangerous also it can be when you don't manage it in the right way. And in these categories, there are names like Julius Caesar or Antony and Cleopatra or Coriolanus. If we have a look at the last years of Elizabeth I, it is a bit more troublesome, a bit more chaotic, a bit problematic also from a religious point of view. And Shakespeare so tried to avoid to speak about episodes that regarded this particular moment. So he went abroad, he went to remote and foreign countries. For example, we're talking about Julius Caesar. Well, Julius Caesar reflects this necessity that it was in England that particular, and Shakespeare's concern for order in some way reflects also this work. It is, of course, an analysis of power. Well, Julius Caesar was killed because they thought that he wanted to become a dictator. But it is very important to have a look at one particular aspect of this work that is so wonderful to put in evidence. For example, the relationship between the orator and the crowd, the changeable mood of the crowd according to how good the orator is and which are the arguments that he tends to put in evidence. For example, when Brutus speaks for the first time, pointing out that Julius Caesar wanted to become a dictator, wanted to control the state with the army. Naturally, he got the people that were with him, and so they were against Caesar, and so they said that Brutus had done a good deed. But when Antony came to speak to the crowd, with his eloquence and showing the corpse of Julius Caesar with all the daggers that had been stabbing his body, and pointing out how much Julius Caesar loved them and what he would have given them, well, the mob, the crowd was turned round and they were for Antony, for Julius Caesar, and they wanted that Brutus and his company, Cassius, also left London. This is just an idea, and if you just pay attention to how wonderful the words are when Antony starts his speech and getting the crowd from an emotional point of view, saying, "Friends, Roman countrymen, lend me your ears." And then he continues, naturally, not facing directly Brutus and Cassius, but going around it, because he says that anyway they are noble men. Till the end he manages to let them know that they are traitors. We can continue with, for example, the comedies. Well, the comedies are also inspired by the Italian short stories. Italian literature is very important for English Elizabethan literature. These ones are surely inspired by the short stories that involve marriages, mistaken identities, but they always have an happy ending. And we can refer to at least two of these works, like A Midsummer Night's Dream and The Merchant of Venice. Well, you all know A Midsummer Night's Dream. It has a fantastic setting. It goes back to the mythical Athens, and which Shakespeare mixed with the countryside of England of the time. So he makes a good, putting together two fundamental elements. But we also have the Merchant of Venice, as we say. Well, the Merchant of Venice, in some way, is important because he tends to point out one important theme of the time, that was the role of the Jews and this conventional and anti-Semitism that was there. Let's not forget that all started also with Christopher Marlowe when he wrote The Jew of Malta. So the idea in Elizabethan times of what the Jews were. Well, they portrayed the Jews as the villains. That's how they considered the Jews of the time. And one of the main characters in the Merchant of Venice, that is the Jew called Shylock, in some way tends to point out these characteristics. Anyway, he is a complex character. In some way, he tends to point out the humanity that characterizes also Shylock, and the themes go from love, money, justice, and mercy anyway. And we tend to have a kind of a kind of emotional feedback from when Shylock pronounces his famous speech, tending to point out that even Jewish people are human beings. When he says, "I am a Jew," hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands? And then he continues, pointing out how normal also the Jews are regarding to people. The problem plays, we can call them problem plays because they are not particularly tragedies, even if they are tragic in their structure, but they have something of the comedy inside it. They have this dark, pessimistic side that revolves around the doubt of the main character. Naturally, our mind goes to Hamlet, but there are others that can go under this particular heading, that is all well that ends well, or measure for measure. We'll talk in particular about Hamlet in a second moment, because it refers to a very important work by Shakespeare, naturally. The tragedies, instead, the great tragedies that go in an important moment that was from 1604 to 1606, more or less. And we can even say that, in many ways, it is the apex that is reached of English early literature. The themes that go around the tragedies are the tragic destiny of mankind, for example, the human foolishness, the man's loneliness in the universe. And just to remind ourselves of at least three of these very important tragedies: Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth. Well, Othello is full of passion and jealousy. Othello represents the champion of honesty, while Iago is the villain. Desdemona is the sincere and the loving life. And the contrast between these two characters of Othello and Iago represent the two opposite poles that give rise to the tragedy. And that's very important. Another, and last of all, just to put all these things together, are the romances. In the romances, we have the elements of tragedy and comedy, the contrast that we have between the virtues and the vices, and also another element that sometimes does not appear in Shakespeare's works, that is the magic and the supernatural. And we can refer to at least two of these last works, that are The Winter's Tale and The Tempest. We know that other works contain these elements of magic, like Midsummer's Night's Dream, but that the forest represents, for example, a free and a magical world outside the city that's in Midsummer's Night Dream. But The Tempest is full of magic. So it is a fundamental element in this very important work. But we'll have a possibility to have a better look also at this work.